Eccoci, buonasera e benvenuti. Welcome to the third day of Italian Bootcamp, il terzo giorno. Oggi parliamo del vocabolario. Today it's all about building your vocabulary in a sustainable way, in un modo sostenibile, which means getting you off the vocabulary hamster wheel. Now, before we begin, I just want to tell you that if you couldn't download any of our wonderful giveaways on day 1 and 2, no worries. We are going to share all the giveaways, all the links to all 5 amazing giveaways on the last day of the bootcamp. Venerdì, that's Friday, okay? So no worries. There's still a chance for you to get your download. Just come on Friday and, of course, stay until the end. That's your wonderful reward for putting up with me until the end of the lesson. Right. Okay. If everyone is here, we can begin. Possiamo cominciare. So, today we are here, mercoledì. This is our little roadmap of the bootcamp. And we are basically filling in this little scheme here. Yesterday, we colored in grammar. We talked about la grammatica, the 3 pillars, the 3 most important elements of Italian grammar. So you can try and recognize every time something feels off what caused that particular exception or rule. Today, we are here in this quadrant and we are going to help you with vocabulary. As always, tradition is tradition. And it's extremely important. We start with the takeaways. And most takeaways were around, first of all, the 3 pillars of Italian grammar and articles, as Tony has described it wonderfully. And he pretty much summed up everything everyone else said in this wonderful, wonderful takeaway. So Tony, thank you very much. And the part that I want to bring to you especially is this one, but the absolute number 1 most awesome takeaway from today has got to be word order. Oh my gosh, factual versus subjective is a game changer. I'm eager to start making new sentences. Well done, Tony. In the past, listen to this, I just told myself, well, in Italian, they do it backwards, so to speak. And that's how I formed my sentences. So to understand the why of it is awesome. Thank you, Tony, for putting it so nicely. For really, this is a great takeaway, and I think you kind of expressed what everyone else said. And then we have 2 more super quickly. Beth said the why. And listen to this. I have been studying Italian daily for a year using 2 different courses and never heard this. I just thought, okay, thank you, Beth. And Adam says, Tania, how is it that no one else has simplified this before the way you did today? So, and that was also like a repeating motif of the takeaway. So why no one ever told us this before? Why no one ever mentioned the word order to us? So guys, I kind of have an answer to this. First of all, word order is not really taught at all. I don't know if you've noticed, those of you who have been learning for a while, I'm sure have noticed, as Beth and Adam did, and Tony, and many, many, many others. And really, I wish I could bring every single comment. But it's not taught for the very same reason you're not taught to concentrate on your own process and not on the information of the language. For the same reason, no one cares about the neurolinguistics of the learner instead of the information of the language. Because basically, like if we're being very frank, people who teach Italian, most people who teach Italian or write textbooks or create course curriculums, let's say, they have, the absolute majority of them has never mastered another language. They have never gone through the process. So as wonderful as they might be, when you don't have the experience of being a successful language learner, you can never know what a language learner really needs. Okay, so this is at least from my experience. It's true, I can claim full proficiency in 4 languages. It's not exactly my, I haven't done, it sounds like a lot better than it actually feels. Like it sounds amazing, but it's really not that fancy. It's just the way my life went. But the most important thing is, and that's the reason the 3D method was born, is that I was not born Italian. I made myself Italian. And that's what actually allowed me to create the 3D method, because wherever you are right now, I've been there. All the challenges you're facing right now, I faced all of them, and I had to search for a way to overcome them. So I struggled with all the things that the traditional methods do and don't do. And I struggled with them for 30 years, almost, well, 29. And the 3D method is the product of me looking for solutions, finding solutions, applying them to my learning process, transforming them into a framework. And that framework became the framework of the 3D method. Okay, so I'll say more about this and maybe even about my own story on the last day. Okay, let's do it like this. When only the people who stay until the end are with us, and it's more small and intimate. So then we'll talk about it. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to turn on the chat now. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to learning new words? La tua sfida o la tua difficoltà più grande. Difficoltà is difficulty and sfida is challenge. Here we go. The chat is all yours. Retention says Annette. Remembering. Retention. Everyone, remembering or retention, that is basically the same thing, right? Memory, context. Someone said context. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Elena says, I speak 3 languages, so I get mixed up between French and Italian. Okay, so we have another Romance language. That's tough, but manageable. We'll see how. Okay, definitely retention. Yes, practice. All right, that's interesting. Oh, you know what? Before we move forward, let's apply something from yesterday. Facciamo questa cosa qua. So, this sentence, qual è la più grande difficoltà? So, of course, this is like the simplified version of the English sentence. What's your biggest challenge or difficulty? So, let's play. Più grande, let's imagine it's just one word and it means the utmost difficulty. What is your utmost difficulty? Is it factual or is it subjective? Subjective, and that's why it comes before the noun. Well done, Jeffrey, Diane, and everyone, and Mary, and everyone else, and Lisa, and Michael. That's why it comes before difficoltà. I said, when I read it to you without looking at it, I said, la difficoltà più grande, right? Why? What's the difference? When I say la più grande difficoltà, the focus is on difficulty, but when I say la difficoltà più grande, the più grande gets most attention. So not just the difficulty, but the utmost difficulty, the biggest one, right? Okay, just to reinforce, you should always, the learning process is a spiral. So we just did another round for this. Right, so I would like you to think about Italian, about the language, but not the language outside of you. It doesn't exist outside of you, more on that later, but your Italian, the way you're building the Italian inside you, okay? You're building this new being, your Italian language. So let's explore the anatomy of that being, l'anatomia del tuo italiano, your Italian. So remember we said grammar is something like 5% of the language. The same way, the skeleton is about 5% of your body. Then on the skeleton of the grammar that gives structure, that holds everything up, we need the flesh. That flesh that kind of dresses your skeleton, the skeleton of your Italian, is vocabulary. And then we cover it nicely with pronunciation. That's the nice, fancy or less fancy clothes. And then there's mentality, which is the identity, the character, but we'll not go into this. But think about it. Even if you've learned all the imaginable grammar of Italian and your pronunciation is flawless, without vocabulary, all you have is just some fancy clothes hanging on a skeleton. Okay, so vocabulary is the substance, the essence of the language. And yet, it's not immediate, it's not easy, non è facile. And we have what I like to call la ruota del criceto. Now, are you spinning the hamster wheel? And by spinning the hamster wheel, of course, I mean learning a word, forgetting it the day after, coming across it 3 days later, recognizing that, well, it's familiar. You know you've done something with it. You know you've seen it somewhere. You can't remember what it means for the life of you. Let me know if this ever happened to you. 100%, says Elisa. Annette, certamente. Yep, says Lee. Jerry, see, always. Ooh, always is worrying, but yes, definitely. Okay, so we have a lot of victims of the hamster wheel all the time, says Jack. Why does it happen? So why is retaining new vocabulary is such a challenge? Like, what happens there? Perché è così difficile imparare le parole nuove, the words that are new? So there are several reasons for that. Okay, so let's take a look at why that happens. Okay, Marilyn says, especially when I try to speak. Kelly says, old dog. No. It has nothing to do with your age. Wait. So, guys, the reasons for let's find who we can blame for your hamster wheel. First of all, and I'm extremely mad by it makes me extremely mad. I'm extremely annoyed by it. No one ever teaches us at school how to retain vocabulary. They make sure that they teach us all these super important languages. They teach us French and German and English, and if you're lucky, Italian. No one ever teaches you how to retain new vocabulary. I have no idea why. I strongly believe these techniques should be taught at school. How can you teach me something without giving me the tools? But that's a speech for another time. So, second reason, they just leave you to figure out how to retain vocabulary, okay? You are supposed to just magically come up with a system to organize and manage that new vocabulary. So not only do you have to retain it without any techniques provided, without any structure provided, you also need to invent your own organizing and managing system for vocabulary. you are also, and this is especially true when it comes to adult learning, you are expected to magically, miraculously retain, absorb this new vocabulary, just as you did when you were 5, okay? A child usually is like a sponge. As a child, you heard the word in another language, you probably remembered it, you didn't need much convincing. Adults do not learn through exposure. It's extremely hard for us because our brain rejects, we said it yesterday, we reject everything that is not relevant, okay? The adult brain is extremely selective about what it is willing to retain. Now, with grammar, we said, yes, let's trick the brain. Let's find un perché, a why. Because if you give your brain un perché, a why, you can trick it into making sense of it. Something is logical. Your brain says, it's logical. It fits a pattern. Let's keep it. You know what? We'll keep it for a while, see how it goes. But unfortunately, unlike grammar, there is no logic behind vocabulary in most cases, and it cannot be explained. It should be just memorized. Now, the brain obviously tends to reject information that it doesn't find relevant or that is out of context, or, and pay attention to this one, it lacks an emotional dimension. Now, in the 3D method, when it comes to learning new words, new vocabulary, we leverage another kind of memory. Instead of leveraging the memory of the brain, we leverage what I call the memory of the heart. So the heart, il cuore, not the brain, non il cervello. Okay? And I think you will understand this better once we get to the emotional part of retaining vocabulary. Now, let's make it as structured as possible. We're going to go through the 5 keys for successful vocabulary retention. Le 5 chiavi. So let's say we are reading a text, maybe we're listening to something, we come across a word we don't know. Let's say for now our word is treno. An example. So treno, you might say, well, I know what it is, it must be train. But you know what? Even if you think you know, even if it's similar to something you already know, you still need to go and look it up. How many of you will go to Google Translate to translate your word? Be honest and tell me io in the chat. Uh-oh. Lynn, you are my hero. Let's see if we have other heroes. Don't know how to use Google. No, we're talking about Google Translate, but you know what? I'll take this. And sentences, says Rob. Sometimes a phrase book, says Denise, mostly with a dictionary. Okay, Philippe, you're my hero as well. So we have something like, we have something like 100 and something, I think, io in the chat. And here's one more. So guys, I need you to stop that immediately, immediatamente, okay? For a very simple reason. Google Translate is not a translation tool. Sorry, it is a translation tool. It translates texts. It is not a dictionary. It is not meant for single words. It never was. And while it's getting better and better every year, it's still not the right tool for translating words. To translate a single word, you need a dictionary. And some of you, very few, said, oh no, I use a dictionary. So stop using Google Translate immediately. Remember, You can only use it. It's meant to work in context. And you only create that context if you have a phrase. Now, I'm not saying Google Translate is the devil. I'm saying it's a tool, and like every single tool in this world and in language learning, you need to know how to use it and when it's the right tool. It is not the right tool to translate a single word and not even two words together. It's a little bit better. It's meant for chunks, pieces of text, because only in context is going to give you the correct answer. And sometimes with our students, we play this game. I tell them, go look up this word, and we laugh at how unreliable the translation is. So what do you use instead of Google Translate? Of course, I'm not going to leave you without an alternative. So wordreference.com is a decent alternative to, well, really any app that you've been using to translate words, because this is meant to translate words. Now, you need not only the word, sometimes the word has like 5 meanings. The word piano in Italian can mean 12 different things. It can mean a piano, like a musical instrument. It can mean floor. It can mean talk quietly. It can mean go slowly. It can mean many things. Go ask Google Translate. That's the only thing it will give you as the main translation is floor. And chances are you're going to rely on that one without going to explore what's below. So you also need the context. And for context, we have reversocontext.net. That's our second tool. And then we also need, well, not for our treno, but for our everyday linguistic work, we need a conjugation tool. And since we're using Reverso, the Reverso conjugation tool, conjugator.reverso.net, is a decent one. I'm not saying they are always right, because they're not, but most of what we've seen is absolutely okay. Better than other online free verb conjugators for Italian, okay? That I can say. Now, we are not done with vocabulary-related tools. There's also something called natural readers that I suggest. Now, natural readers reads aloud words and phrases in Italian. It has a very nice free option, a very generous one. And it's a tool that we usually suggest to our students to check pronunciation. So if you have a phrase and you read it aloud, and you'll find out that we read every single thing aloud, because that's how you actually build fluency, by reading aloud every single thing you read or write yourself. Sometimes you're not sure about the pronunciation, and this is where you check it. Now, that's for the apps, but some of you might be as crazy as I am and maybe prefer a paper dictionary, a bilingual paper dictionary. So, how do we know if a dictionary is a good dictionary? Now, I am going to suggest a few, just to give you names, but again, instead of feeding you once, I want to give you the recipe. And my recipe is, how do you choose a dictionary? There are tons of good dictionaries and billions of really bad ones. Okay, so this is how you know if a dictionary is a bad dictionary. This one, for example, if you go and look up our word treno that we're looking up, this is what it gives you. That's the information you get. You get singular, S, masculine, M, translation, train. Really. Now, let's go to a really, really good one. And the really, really, really good one is the Collins-Sansone Italian Dictionary. Now, I'm not telling you get that one for a very simple reason. This is what it looks like. It's not something you're going to want to bring with you to a trip, right? It's like 3 kilos or more. But this is what a good dictionary looks like. It gives you every single possibility for treno, whether it's in biology or fashion or transportation. It will tell you the various expressions, okay? It will suggest various possibilities. And I think I don't need to say more, you see the difference. So bad dictionary, better dictionary. And of course, we have, if you really prefer paper books, like hardcover, hard copy, there's the 501 Italian verbs, which let me know in the chat if you have it. What if you cannot spell? Okay, we'll talk about it in a second. We'll talk about it in a second about spelling. Yes, love my 501, says Anita. Yeah. So I love this one. I've had it for years and years. This is actually the old edition. The new ones are yellow, as you'd know. A word of warning about this one. Now, when you're looking up your verb, please ignore every single tense you haven't learned. So if you're just learning the present tense, do not look at all the others. You don't need them. Chances are you won't need most of them, like ever, to use them actively, okay? So if you know 2 tenses, that's the 2 tenses you look at. If you know 3, that's the 3 tenses you look up at. Everything else you need to ignore. Va bene? Deal? Otherwise, you just get overwhelmed, and don't try to learn from this. That's not your learning tool, that's your reference tool. Now, this is looking at the future, and we always need to project our thoughts to the future, to put like little anchors, to throw little anchors into the future. Now, in the future, I see fluency in the future. And once we get to that fluency, we're going to need some monolingual dictionaries. Now, this is especially true if you're going to do something professionally with Italian, or you're going to be very, very, very passionate about it. Now, I can show you the Devotoli one. Again, these are monsters. I love them. They're my monsters. But again, you don't need them. But at some point, if you're really committed, really interested, you hit that C1 level, get yourself an online or a hard copy version of one of these or equivalent ones, a good Italian to Italian dictionary. Why? Because honestly, that's the next level. When you don't translate Italian with English anymore, you translate Italian with Italian. Until you get to C1, just remember it. Think about me when you get there, but for now, just remember it. Now, this is a cheat sheet for all of these things, and this is actually our giveaway for today. So don't worry about writing everything down. Okay, I'm gonna let you download it at the end. That was the first key, the right dictionary. Now, we found our word, we looked it up in a dictionary, and our next step is to write it down somewhere, organize vocabulary. And if your desk looks something like this, chances are that the process of organizing vocabulary is not going to be extremely effective, right? Now, I mentioned these notebooks in our first lesson, and I also mentioned that this is how you make sure that your brain processes all the new words and all the new information in the best and most organized way. We basically allow the brain to create frameworks, structure, and organize every single kind of material and put it in a box. and we do it by preparing these boxes and distributing the information in these boxes. So speaking of vocabulary, we have our vocabulary notebook. Now, I've prepared some possible formats. This also was a question in the group. So let me just show you what I have for you. So let's start with a grammar notebook. So a grammar notebook can be something rather simple. It can be a smaller, like medium format, and that's the notebook that is very clean. Everything goes there after you have processed it, and you write it like very nicely and cleanly. So it can be something like this maybe, or like this. Okay, whatever works for you. Now, your vocabulary notebook, we've already mentioned that it needs to fit into your handbag or yet into your hand luggage, or you need to be able to take it with you on your next trip to Italy. So this is a great format. Okay, something like this, maybe A5. This is a less good format. This is not perfect. It's too small. Now, it looks cute, I know, I love it, but it's too small. Why? Because in addition to your new word, you also need to hold on to the original sentence, and you need to write a sentence yourself. So this is going to be a bit too small for that. Okay, so this is this might be your perfect format for a vocabulary notebook. Now, your exercise notebook could be and should be probably something like this. Give yourself as much space as you can in your exercise notebook. This is like a bigger, I think it's maybe even bigger than A4, but maybe it is an A4. And it's like, it allows you to write, it has long lines, and it has a lot of space, and you can just scribble there and not worry about not having space, okay? Now, audio journal, we already talked about it, and there's your Italian journal, which also can be something like this or bigger, okay? Because I know that most students prefer to take their Italian journal with them as well. Now, you will ask me, so wait a minute, can't we just keep everything in like a digital format on our iPad or phone or computer? And the answer is assolutamente no. Because, guys, we are writing by hand. Scriviamo a mano. Dobbiamo scrivere a mano. We need to write by hand. Why do we need to write by hand? I could deliver a whole lesson just about that, but it's enough to say here in this context that when we write out our words and letters and sentences, the way our brain interacts with the language, with what we're writing through this kinesthetic process, is much more profound and effective than just the movement of our little fingers typing on a keyboard or on a phone. This repetitive movement leaves a much less defined trace in our brain. So if we want any kind of retention, we need paper and we need a pen, and we need to start putting that pen to that paper. Now, for this, I need your full attention, okay? If you were looking at something else or listening to something else up until this point, this is super important. One of the biggest mistakes that you might make after you have looked up a word in your dictionary, in the right dictionary, and you've written it down by hand in your wonderful, correct format notebook. The biggest mistake that you can make after doing that is to connect your treno to the word train. And that's bad, my friend, because that means that for the rest of your Italian speaking days, when you hear treno, the first thing you think is, ooh, train. And you don't think, ooh, this thing, right? You don't imagine the thing, you imagine the word. So I need you to connect your new word, not to the word we had to translate it with, just to give it some meaning. I need you to connect it with an image or a smell or a taste or a sound or a texture or a sensation or an emotion that for you is somehow connected to this object, okay? Maybe you think about your first train ride with your nonna, with your grandmother. Maybe it's the smell of Trenitalia, which is something not very pleasant, but definitely unforgettable. Okay, it needs to be that thing. So let's just make another example. Let's say your word is miele. Don't connect it to honey. Connect it to the texture, to the smell, to the taste of honey. And maybe dig out and fish out from your memory some wonderful, emotionally relevant moment that has to do with honey. Or just go and taste your favorite honey as you learn the word. Okay, I hope this makes sense, but always think not word to word, word to image, smell, taste, texture, sound, sensation, emotion, anything. Just do not connect it to another word because you're wiring your brain wrong. Our next big, enormous mistake that we can make at this point is to take the word out of context. Now, if you're just learning about miele, even if you've done everything right up until this point, you did the right dictionary, you wrote it down, you imagined honey, but you know what? You took it out of context. And something out of context, you are much less likely to remember it. So what we need to do is to keep it in context. And that means that we're going to write out the original sentence. That's why I said this is too small. This can still contain the word and the translation, but you need some more space so you can also write the sentence that it came with, right? So, scrivi la frase originale. It comes in a sentence, it doesn't come in a vacuum, so we need to keep that sentence as well. And then we need to write our own sentence because the chances that the previous sentence has any emotional relevance to us, those chances are extremely slight, right? So we need to write a new sentence that means something to us. And lastly, we're still working on that word in the vocabulary notebook. I recommend to use color coding. Usa vari colori. Use different colors. That's an imperative. So before you ask, wait, what do you mean color coding? How do we use it? This is how you use it. So any kind of challenges or potential challenges, you can underline or highlight with different colors. It can be irregular suffixes, irregular verbs, irregular gender or number endings, maybe plural forms. Something you have misspelled in the past, and now you need to remember how to spell it correctly. So remember, colors, especially if you're a visual learner, they're an extremely powerful addition to your vocabulary notebook. La terza chiave, our third key, is our next step, really. Because it's very nice that we found the word, we wrote it down, we translated it, we wrote our nice sentences in the vocabulary notebook. And then what do? Do we just leave it there and just hope that it has been magically retained? No, we don't, because it won't be. So what we need is a structured review schedule. And this is something I've already mentioned on day one, and hopefully today it makes even more sense. So when I talked about the repeated reviews on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, I meant of everything. Now we're talking specifically about vocabulary that is part of that everything. So let's say today we learned treno and miele, and this word, la revisione, which means review, okay? And maybe two other words that will come later. Or you maybe also learn the word chiave today. So these new words, hopefully you're writing them down. Maybe you're even catching pieces of sentences that I use them with. And tomorrow, possibly, hopefully, in your first morning learning slot, you will start by reviewing these words. That's your daily review. Every day you review all the new words from the previous day. That works for verbs as well. At the end of the week, you have your weekly review, where you review all the words that you have learned during the week. If you remember them, that's perfect. So the next time you see them will be at your monthly review. If you do not remember some of them, those words go back into the cycle and you will review them the next day, okay? And then we have at the end of the month, every 4 weeks, we will have a review of all the words from the past month. And again, all the words that didn't go, that you didn't remember, that you couldn't remember, they go back into the process. At this point, the most common question is, wait, but can we use flashcards? Can we make our own flashcards? You can make flashcards for things that can have a visual equivalent, absolutely, but do not give up on the sentences. So even with flashcards, please keep the original sentence and write out your new sentence. And I will say more about that. So these are the 3 phases of reviewing your vocabulary. Il giorno dopo, the following day. Il ripasso settimanale, your weekly review. Il ripasso mensile, your monthly review. Okay? Remember this? And where do these time slots go? Can anyone tell me where they go? Where we're supposed to schedule them? In our diary? No, not exactly. Calendario. Tony, thank you. Your Italian calendar. Absolutely. Someone has worked with the 7 keys. Well done. This goes into your Italian calendar. La quarta chiave, key number 4. We are going to leverage our learning abilities. Remember the learning abilities, visual, auditory, we'll see them. Facciamo leva sulle abilità di apprendimento, just like he does. So we have all these learning types, and I'm sure you know which one is your predominant type. You have visual, auditory, kinesthetic, right? Visual, we learn through seeing or reading. That's when color coding works best. Auditory, when you learn through hearing or listening to something. And kinesthetic is when you are learning by doing. This powerful processing of the language or of whatever you're learning through your body, through your fingers, through activities. Now, domanda, a question. Are you leveraging your predominant learning ability when learning Italian? Yes, go ahead and answer in the chat. And tell me which one. Is it auditory? Also tell me, of course, is it auditory? Is it visual? Okay, so we have Marilyn who says, I'm a kinesthetic learner, so not yet. Yes, visual, nope. I don't really know. Auditory, visual. I will from now on. Wait, Melinda. It was a tricky question. Wait. Oh, okay, we have so many visual learners. Kinesthetic learners. Yes, and someone who is visual and auditory. I do a bit better kinesthetic learning. Visual and kinesthetic, a lot of visuals, so many visuals. Combination, okay. All right, so that's very interesting. I see that most of you are visual learners and they leverage the visual abilities. And that's wonderful, guys. That's the most common mistake that you can make. Leveraging your predominant learning ability or learning type. You actually need to do what some of you are already doing. Well done. You need to process to get the best possible result. Every single new word has to be processed through all language skills. So this is how it goes. Pay attention. You need to read it. Leggere. So we come across a word, we read it. If we heard it, we go to the dictionary and we read it. Then you need to listen to it. How do you listen to it? Most online dictionaries and apps have the listening function. If yours doesn't, please go to Natural Readers. That's one of the apps that actually reads stuff for you, but you need to listen to it. Then you need to write it down. And of course, we have our vocabulary notebook for that. Scrivere. So we have leggere, to read, ascoltare, listen, scrivere, to write, and not a huge surprise, I do hope, pronunciare. We need to pronounce the word, and that's the kinesthetic part together with writing. Okay, so we cover all of our abilities, all the language skills for every single word. So we can never find ourselves in a situation when we can read the word, we can write it, but we don't recognize it when we hear it, or we can't say it correctly. How do we do that? By processing every single word through all these three language skills, basically. Which brings us to key number 5, la quinta chiave. And that's where we talk about context and relevance, about emotion and imagination. Because all that we have done until now, yes, it helps us to process the word through the correct, like to create a correct process for retention. But what really helps us keep the word inside is this, is the 5th key. So to retain a word, you need context, you need relevance, you need emotion, and you need imagination. Where do we find context? Can someone tell me? How do we know? Where does the context come from? Okay, reading prior trips to Italy. La frase, thank you, Kat. Thank you. From the sentence that we brought with the word. And guys, I'm going to repeat it one more last time. If you want to use the chat, if you want me to keep the chat on, do not discuss anything. Do not use it for anything that is not directly related to what I'm saying, because I will just take the chat away, and that will be such a pity because I enjoy so much seeing what you write. Okay, you have written in your notebook, correct, and very well said. You have written the original sentence in the notebook, and that's your context. And then how do we create relevance? You should know that too by now. How do we create relevance? Ron, I think you meant you were still responding to the previous one, right? Yes, correct, absolutely. By writing, Annette, you are my star today. Well, one of them. Write a new sentence. That's exactly where the relevance comes from. You create relevance by writing a sentence that is not just random sentence, not the famous "the cat is on the table." I don't know about you, that's from my childhood, but something that is relevant. We'll see how to do that. Now, that new sentence, it's not just relevant, it also has an emotional aspect to it. It has some emotional meaning for you, and it triggers imagination. And let's see how that can be done. We are, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure lately anymore, but as human beings, we are human beings, and as human beings, we tend to retain or remember things that are meaningful to us personally or things that engage us emotionally. So yes, logic works and it works for grammar. Not much emotion can be found in grammar unless you find the connection to pronunciation, and then maybe yes. But what we can leverage here with vocabulary, the meaning, the meaningfulness of those words for us. So when you put your new word in your personal context, it has to be meaningful to you, to your personal experience. So once we have written it and the sentence and it's in the notebook, we have read it, written it, pronounced it, and listened to it, your next step is to imagine a situation where you would actually use that word. And it has to be somehow a meaningful and emotionally charged situation. And that's how you trick your brain into making the word yours, because it's triggered into a state in which it says, oh, I might need it in that situation. You or are almost rehearsing for that situation. And we can use our macchina from yesterday, okay? And let's say your word that you need to remember from yesterday is macchina. How can you trigger all of these? How can you tick all of these boxes? Context, relevance, emotion, and imagination. You can by maybe thinking about your first car, by maybe thinking about how maybe your dad gave you your first car as a present. So all of these things, all of that emotional charge, all of this personal meaning, you need to leverage it. So what do we do with macchina? We read the word. We listen to that word pronounced. I pronounced it for you yesterday. Francesco pronounced it for you yesterday. But if not, you use one of the apps. Then you imitate it. You shadow the pronunciation. So you make sure you pronounce it yourself several times. You write it down in your vocabulary notebook. And then you write an emotionally meaningful new sentence with it. And it has to be relevant to your reality, and it has to be emotionally charged. So let's say you are a huge Tesla fan, enthusiast, and the most meaningful and emotionally charged sentence you can think of is, my new car is a Tesla. La mia macchina nuova è una Tesla. So what can be a situation? So we said, imagine a situation, I haven't said it yet, but now you need to imagine a situation. That's your final next step. After you have this meaningful, emotionally charged phrase, you need to imagine a situation in which you are actually pronouncing and using that sentence. And in your case, it could be, maybe you are a big fan of Elon Musk and you meet them in a hotel waiting for an elevator, and you get in the elevator with him and you breathe deeply and you say to Elon Musk in Italian, it's a hotel in Italy, la mia macchina nuova è una Tesla. Okay? But you need to be a really big fan for that, both of Tesla and Elon Musk. Not everyone is, but a lot of people are. So that is a great example of charging a word emotionally, making it a sentence, imagining a situation, standing in front of your mirror or your cat and pronouncing it in Italian with feeling. Our brain responds to these things. It responds to emotion it responds to context, it responds to imagination, and it is always triggered. Because in this case, it's triggered by these things. In this case, what we're leveraging is not the logical memory of the brain as we did yesterday with grammar. We are leveraging what I call the memory of the heart, the emotional memory. It allows us to retain words that mean something to us or that could be useful to us in a certain uplifting situation. And that memory or that emotional level, it can also be negative or very sad. As long as it's powerful, it will work for retention. Now, which brings us to your compiti, to your assignments from the first and the second day. Please go ahead and put in the chat your verb of the first day and your 3 words. I explicitly asked you for these 3 words to be absolutely new words for you. Let me know if you remember them. Tell me the verb, tell me the 3 words. Let's see. All right. Alan remembers, Sandra remembers, Dan, well done. Chris, Kelly, Nomi, Jack, yes, Lynn, Will. Oof, it's too quick for me. So many of you remember. Excellent, guys. Well done. Mangiare. Someone has a word mangiare. Very well done, guys. And now you know the reason you remember these words so well. Even though we didn't have sentences, even though we did not do the whole contextualizing thing, but you remember your verb, because it was emotionally charged, it was your Italian verb of the year. The verb you're going to crochet on a pillow and put as part of your Italian shrine. Your 3 nouns described your Italian dream. I can't imagine anything more emotionally charged. Okay, so now you know why we did it. And now you know how powerful this can be. Today, we have, yeah, well done, guys. I see more and more words and sentences and verbs coming in. Very well done. Molto bene. Bravi. I think most of you, the absolute majority, remembers. If you don't remember, it's not your fault. You just chose something that wasn't emotionally engaging. Next time, you know what to do. Okay, so assignments. You might have noticed I enjoy reading your takeaways very much. I try to reply to as many as I possibly humanly can. Today, I'm asking you to share your takeaways from this session under this video in the Facebook group. And now you know why we do it. I'm going to ask you to choose 3 Italian adjectives. Yesterday it was nouns, now it's adjectives, and not just any adjectives, but adjectives that describe you at your best. Again, the only rule is they have to be through 3 absolutely new words. Completely new, you have to go and look them up. Now you know in which dictionary to do that. Okay, so do that and let's see if you remember them tomorrow. Okay, and this video is here to remind me that it's time to ask our wonderful Daniela to drop our giveaway link into the chat. Here we go. Grazie, Daniela. So guys, go ahead, download your giveaway. It's a complete list of all the dictionaries and vocabulary apps that I mentioned today. Make sure you download it and usatela questa lista. Start using this list. Okay. Tomorrow, domani. Tomorrow we will talk about one of my most favorite topics in the whole language learning world, and that's la pronuncia italiana. So we're going to dive into Italian sounds, into building your Italian voice the right way, the authentic way, without pretending to be native, without forcing yourself, but building your Italian voice as part of your Italian identity. And I hope you will enjoy yourself very, very much tomorrow. One last time, I'm dropping the link in just to make sure that everyone got a chance to download it. Danny maybe drop it to the YouTube guys as well. And we will see you tomorrow, guys. Grazie a tutti e a domani.